The candlelight flickers low, painting the stone walls in a soft, golden hush. Outside, a slow rain has begun, more of a whisper than a storm. The hearth is warm. The straw mattress beneath you is only slightly poky tonight, and the air smells like damp linen, firewood, and curiously wild thyme. Somewhere a dog coughs. It could be your dog. It could be a person pretending to be a dog. In this village, either is possible, the kind of drizzle that politely suggests you stay indoors and mind your own business. You are nestled in a small cottage tucked on the edge of a sleepy medieval village, and the charming chaos of medieval weddings. Spoiler, they're not what the romantic ballads claim. There will be no glittering gowns, no horse-drawn carriages, no rose petals tossed from balconies by angelic flower girls. Mostly, there will be mud and meat pies, and legal documents sealed with wax that looks vaguely like raspberry jam. It helps more sleepy history lovers find this channel, and we like to imagine each new subscriber as one more peasant who didn't tea trip in the pig pen. Tonight's story is about love, sort of an obligation. Definitely, you probably won't make it through this day. The match was arranged last spring, with much nodding and exchange of ale. True love may be a convenient solution for both families' debts. Certainly, consent was technically required, but so was someone to vouch for your grain taxes. But that's the point. We're building a village of our own, one snoozy listener at a time. A pig is chewing on one of them. It might have been the wedding notice. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe. Her hair is being braided with ribbons. She is not allowed to smile too much, it's said to attract jealousy. And comment below, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are. The safest bet, brown, symbolic of humility, also symbolic of mud. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. He clears his throat with the force of a man who once gave a sermon to 5 goats by accident and now refuses to take chances. You wake up before the sun. The blacksmith is polishing something that might once have been a ceremonial sword and is now just very shiny and mostly blunt. A goose honks loudly near the church. The goose is not invited, but no one has the heart to tell her. Why? Because someone's getting married today. Not you, though. The thought lingers for a half-second before dissolving like steam over porridge. The entire village is already buzzing. The baker's lit his oven before dawn. You shuffle outside, stretching your arms and blinking into the grayish light. Your boots sink half an inch into the mud. Congratulations, you're officially dressed. It's the wedding of Thomas de Cooper's daughter, Ellen, and Wilfred, who owns exactly 2 pigs and a vague sense of confidence. One major historical fact. In medieval Europe, marriages among commoners were often less about romance and more about property, survival, and social alliances. As you walk toward the center of the village, you pass the familiar crooked fence where local announcements are posted. You head toward the makeshift platform in front of the church and an even arrangement of wooden boards and borrowed chairs, already decorated with garlands of wilted ivy and hopeful daisies. The bride has not yet arrived. This is normal. Ellen is, at this moment, being wrapped in her best woolen gown by 3 aunts, 2 cousins, and 1 neighbor who may or may not have been invited. Obscure cultural tidbit. In some rural areas, it was considered bad luck for a bride to wear too many colors. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers truly believed in these superstitions or simply liked having reasons to keep things plain and affordable. You settle into a spot by the steps and watch as more villagers gather, some bringing gifts, others bringing curiosity, and one man holding a live chicken, which may be symbolic or may just be lunch. The priest appears, robes slightly askew, eyes bleary from the morning cider. And then Ellen arrives. Her gown is simple but clean, her boots are muddy but proud, her face is unreadable, hat in hand, hair combed to one side as if trying to flee the ceremony before he can, which in this century is as close to joy as one gets at a legally binding event. Wilfred is already waiting. The goose honks again. The crowd quiets. The rain stops, which none of the villagers understand, but everyone nods along too, because when in doubt, nodding is safer than questioning. The bells begin to ring, and somewhere, she still isn't invited. The ceremony begins with a prayer. The priest speaks in Latin. Behind you, someone sneezes beside a boy who's trying to balance a turnip on his head for no discernible reason. The air smells like wet hay and optimism laced with confusion. Just hands clasped and a nod to the heavens. Nodded and blessed. The kind of prayer that sounds vaguely hopeful, but is mostly a polite formality. No rings. You're standing near the back. It's where the term tying the knot quite literally comes from. You watch as the cord is looped. Whoever caught it was said to be next to marital, at least next to have very sore fingers. No one's quite sure what the blessing says, but it ends with amen, which is always a safe exit strategy, or just an excellent excuse to aim something at your cousin. The priest finishes the invocation and switches to the local tongue. Salt, but brief. Contractual phrases spoken clearly for the record, and of course a small pouch of onions. He asks the usual questions. Is there a lawful reason these 2 should not be joined? Wilfred offers her the crustiest end of a loaf, which she accepts without complaint. In this century, that counts as flirting. It's warm, strong, and possibly alive. In some regions, it was custom for the bride to throw a shoe instead of a bouquet. Someone opens a jug of ale and passes it around like a holy relic. Is the pig okay? A few children start spinning in circles. Again, they are gifted bread, because nothing says happy marriage like a promise of seasoning and tears. You take a sip. The bells ring once more. Does anyone object? Ellen and Wilfred exchange vows, not poetic declarations of eternal love, and later be fed to the pigs, or to anyone still hungry enough not to ask questions. You notice Ellen glancing down at her boots. You imagine she's wondering if marriage changes how mud works. It does not. He is gently guided away by two aunts and a bucket of water. And the pig under the cot is still sleeping through the most important day in someone else's life, where a long table has been assembled out of borrowed benches, doors, and one slightly uneven coffin lid. Here's your historical fact. Prior to the formalization of church weddings, many medieval marriages were considered valid, as long as vows were spoken aloud in front of witnesses. The church gradually took greater control, but for centuries, a marriage could be declared simply by mutual consent, a bit like declaring bankruptcy loudly and with someone watching. As part of the ritual, a cloth is tied around their hands, a symbol of union. Then comes the kiss, not romantic, not showy, but a brief press of cheeks and a slightly awkward shuffle. Weird cultural tidbit. Historians still debate whether the shoe-throwing tradition was symbolic. The villagers cheer, because it's the part of the wedding where everyone knows what to do. A woman begins playing a lute badly but with passion. The new couple is led to a bench beneath a canopy of linen sheets, held up by four rather nervous teenagers with broomsticks. You watch as Ellen smiles politely at her new husband. The feast will begin soon, which means you'll need to find a place to sit where the chickens, 1T, try to steal your food. But for now, the sun has broken through the clouds. Smart pig. The feast begins slowly, like most things in the village, with a great deal of noise, confusion, and one man who insists on singing before anyone is seated. You follow the scent of roasted meat and baked root vegetables toward the common green. Trenchers are being passed around, thick round slabs of coarse bread that'll double as plates. A large pot of stew simmers over a fire. It contains barley, onions, turnips, and a questionable amount of enthusiasm. You find a seat near the middle of the table next to a woman, whose laugh could startle a hawk, and a man carving a radish into what he claims is a dove but looks more like a terrified potato. The bride and groom are placed at the head of the table, beneath a hanging garland of ivy and rosemary. They hold hands briefly before realizing it's difficult to eat stew with only one free arm. The newlyweds themselves weren't expected to fund the event unless they were wealthy, in which case expectations rose with every goat on the guest list. The origin of the goose is unclear. The goose herself may not have agreed to this. One major historical fact. Feasts in medieval villages were communal affairs, often supported by contributions from the entire community. No one asks for seconds because you simply keep eating until someone takes the pot away. Food is served: stew, fresh cheese, a few loaves of dark bread, and, miraculously, a smoked goose. You take a bite of bread. It's dense enough to sink a small boat, but comforting. The cheese is sharp. The stew is hot. In some parts of England, wedding guests were expected to bring small cakes, which were stacked high into a wobbly tower. You imagine what it might be like to be the bride, or the groom, or the cabbage. If the couple could kiss over the pile without it falling, it meant a prosperous future. If it did fall, well, it meant you had a perfectly reasonable excuse to eat cake sooner. The man beside you offers a sip from his flask. It tastes like apples in despair. You nod in thanks. Obscure cultural tidbit. Historians still debate whether this tradition was rooted in fertility rites or just an early form of competitive baking. No one is sure what the case might be. The feast table is slowly being cleared, mostly by dogs and opportunistic chickens. The fiddler is a man of passion, not precision. He only knows 3 songs, but each can be stretched into 6 variations by speeding up or forgetting the last verse. The rest of the guests, slightly full and extremely tipsy, have moved to the open space near the church for dancing. Your foot connects with something. Possibly a turnip. Possibly someone's cousin. Apologies are mumbled. Laughter erupts. A jug of ale makes its way down the table, followed by a bowl of preserved plums and a small child carrying a cabbage just in case. Someone starts a song, this time a proper one, and others join in, slapping their knees and clapping in a rhythm that makes up in enthusiasm what it lacks in coordination. She removes it gently and hands it to the pig, who eats it. You hum along. You sway a little. One of them is reciting a poem. Another is asleep, propped against the stones like a very committed gargoyle. The sun begins to dip low behind the trees. Candles are lit. The shadows grow longer. The laughter gets louder. Ellen looks dazed but content. Wilfred is smiling like someone who doesn't quite know how he got here, but is determined to enjoy it anyway. The pigger's awake now, circling the table with a look of intense interest and absolutely no manners, or a mild joke that requires explanation and then still doesn't land. It was, mercifully, symbolic in most communities, with guests leaving after the couple was seen to their room. But in some cases, The rituals became rowdy and intrusive, prompting the church to slowly discourage such antics. They nod politely. They are practicing the ancient art of being gracious while exhausted. It's a feast, and in its own strange, morally unpolished way. It's beautiful. Dusk slides gently into evening, wrapping the village in its familiar blue-gray shawl. Well, dancing might be generous. It's a series of circles, stomps, and mildly competitive You're swept into a line of villagers clasping hands and turning in uneven rhythms. At the edge of the dance area, the bride and groom are seated on a low bench. Every so often, someone brings them food or gifts. One historical fact: in many medieval villages, a key part of the wedding celebration was the bedding ceremony, a public escort of the couple to their shared bed. Thankfully, this village favors privacy. Though someone does attempt to pin a sprig of rosemary to Eleanor's hair for fertility, you step away from the dance and wander toward the well, where a few other guests have taken refuge from the merriment. The sky above is brilliant now, stars punching through the velvet dark one by one. You breathe in the cool air. It tastes like earth, firewood, and roasted onions. Weird cultural tidbit: in some German villages, guests would block the doorway of the bride and groom's new home until they paid a toll, often with food, drink, or small favors. The heart around it is slightly lopsided. So is the marriage? Probably. But that's how most things start. Bernard the spider is back in his corner, having spent the day weaving a delicate web across your only clean tunic. The practice was known as bridal door customs and was either a charming tradition or low-level extortion, depending on the mood of the crowd. Historians still debate whether these customs were rooted in protecting the couple's honor, or in one last excuse for free food. You wander past the herb garden near the church, where someone's carved Ellen plus Wilfred into a wooden fence. Back at the cottage, you peel off your damp shoes and set them by the hearth. You let him have it. Tonight, the village sleeps with full bellies, sore feet, and mild embarrassment. A wedding has happened. A new home begins. You spot the baker sweeping breadcrumbs off his stoop with a broom that has clearly lost the will to sweep. A child is crying over a dropped plum. A goat is on someone's roof. The once magnificent table now looks like a battlefield of overturned wilted garlands, and suspiciously chewed goose bones. A few villagers are picking their way through the debris, collecting anything still edible or useful or, in some cases, mysterious but intriguing. After medieval weddings, it was common for the couple to be visited the next day by family or neighbors, who would check in on the marriage and sometimes offer advice, gifts, or more food. This informal tradition was both supportive and lightly nosy, as most community traditions are. Outside, a rooster crows not enthusiastically, but like someone being forced to fulfill a contract. You sigh, pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, and shuffle toward the door. You join the group of onlookers, keeping a respectful distance behind the bride's aunt, who smells strongly of lavender and strong opinions. And as you slide under your blanket, you hear the last notes of the fiddler's third song. Wilfred is holding a mug of something that might be soup or might be an old family remedy for nerves. Either way, he looks like he's surviving the second. A slightly bruised apple and a blessing that includes at least 3 saints and 1 goat. It sounds a bit like joy. In one recorded case, a couple was gifted 43 eggs, a hen, and a poem about barnyard romance. Ellen thanks you with a soft smile. Wilfred nods like someone who will absolutely forget where he put it. The hen laid no eggs, and the poem was politely buried. Morning comes slowly, like it's not entirely convinced it should show up. You crack one eye open and immediately regret it. Your head feels like it's been stuffed with bread dough and left to rise overnight. The village is already awake. People are moving in that slow, foggy way that suggests both celebration and slight regret took place the night before. Just another post-wedding morning. You make your way toward the green, where yesterday's feast has become today's cleanup. You grab a half-empty jug of cider and sit on the church steps. It's warm from the sun and smells like last night's dreams. Your historical fact for today: the bride and groom emerge from their cottage looking slightly better than expected. Ellen is smiling. Someone rings a small bell to signal the start of the gift walk-up, local tradition in which the couple strolls through the village receiving tokens of goodwill. The first house offers them a loaf of bread and a kiss on the cheek. Obscure cultural tidbit: in some regions, it was customary for newlyweds to receive eggs as a symbol of fertility. Historians still debate whether these symbolic gifts were sincerely meaningful or just a clever way to offload surplus produce. Back in the present moment, you hand over your own gift, a small pouch of dried herbs tied with a ribbon. The walk continues past the fields, past the tithing barn, and eventually circles back to the well, where the bride drops a single sprig of rosemary in the water for luck. The crowd disperses. You linger, watching the ripples fade. There's something quiet in the air, now not silence, but the soft hum of a village breathing again after a long, festive exhale. You head home, your shoes squelching slightly in the dirt. Bernard the spider greets you from your windowsill. You give him a look. He doesn't blink. Smart spider. This morning, you're summoned, not in a dramatic, Royal Scroll kind of way, more in the form of the reeve shouting from 3 houses down and waving a stick in your direction. Which in this village counts as formal invitation. You follow the core down the lane, past the same pig, and arrive at the manor's outer courtyard. Today is the day the marriage record gets written. This sounds important. It is not. The bride and groom stand awkwardly nearby. The parchment curls at the edges. The ink refuses to dry. The entire process takes longer than the ceremony. You sit beside the scribe's table, watching ink drip slowly onto parchment as he attempts to spell Wilfred with the enthusiasm of a man writing his 6th legal union this month. The scribe blows on the ink and mutters a half-hearted blessing under his breath. These records were usually kept by the parish priest or a manor official, assuming mice didn't eat them. Your historical fact. By the late Middle Ages, many villages kept written records of marriages, especially ones the church required, bans and documentation to help prevent bigamy and improper unions. Wilfred signs the document with a smudge. Ellen draws a careful X. You are then handed a basket of flowers and told, somewhat vaguely, to help with the bedding linens. In some traditions, you see the bride's cousin trying to play a wedding tune on a wooden flute. The result is somewhere between wounded duck and accidental summoning. Was believed that placing iron nails or knives under the marriage bed would ward off evil spirits, or some even placed small bread loaves under the bed for fertility. Whether this worked is unclear, or whether villagers just got creative with whatever was lying around. But you are expected to help prepare the couple's sleeping quarters with appropriate comforts, which in this case means putting rosemary under the pillows and scattering dried rose petals over the straw mattress. You do this quickly, trying not to think too hard about the symbolism. Now, don't panic. You're not expected to watch anything. That particular tradition has long since fallen out of fashion. Here, thankfully, you place a candle on the bedside stool and adjust the linens. Laughter rings out from the newlyweds' home. It's not loud, it's not forced, it just sounds ordinary, familiar, like two people trying to figure out what comes after the feast, after the flowers, after the papers are signed. The day winds down. You boil a few onions, tear a hunk of bread, and watch the sky through your window. It shifts slowly from pale blue to honey gold. Obscure cultural tidbit. Historians still debate whether these items had spiritual significance. You pour yourself a cup of cider. As you exit the cottage of Corstu, the idea that even in a world of mud and laws and goats that steal announcements, maybe love still gets the last word. You applaud politely. He bows, back at your own home. In the distance, you smile, and you toast silently.